So in this video, we will start, as I explained in the last video, with the strategy part of every blockchain project. And we will highlight a couple of frameworks in this chapter that are used or have been used to identify whether blockchain is the right technology for a specific use case, but then also to identify whether blockchain at all makes sense for your company. And we will see one of the frameworks that will then prioritize, once a company has developed multiple use cases, how to prioritize them. So I think first and foremost, it's interesting to know that there are frameworks also for blockchain and also for blockchain strategy and the setup, of course. I think, of course, that's not rocket science, but I think knowing that blockchain has already evolved for more than 10 years, we can extract some best practices. And some of the frameworks hold true throughout the industries. We'll see it later. There are frameworks that highlight design choices, which are not the kind of tech choices, but also some things that are peculiar about blockchain marketing. But some of the frameworks are, of course, applicable to other industries too. Some of them are particular about blockchain, though. So here in this video, we will look at 2 or 2.5 frameworks that highlight the use of blockchain for either one specific use case or one specific company, or how to prioritize them as a whole. I usually like to start with this, let's say this is already a popular and quite well-known framework of blockchain. And I think the reason why I like to show this or mention this is that all of these frameworks were developed during a time where we were in the hype phase. And of course, when there is a hype and you have buzzwords, you have on the other side, as blockchain was a very polarizing topic, you have on the other side critics, which of course is healthy and makes sense. But I think these sort of frameworks developed during a time when actually, so also when you Google blockchain frameworks, you find a lot that you say, should I use a blockchain? No, is the answer. And so here, this is a very, it seems like a very technical framework, and it looks at one specific use case and says, should I use a blockchain or not, from a tech perspective? And of course, the question do make sense, but you probably might have heard by now, I'm a little bit critical about it because it is, firstly, it only focuses on the tech, and secondly, it is very black and white. So you see that for each question, you only have a yes or no answer. And of course, do you need a ledger? Well, this should be a prerequisite. Are there multiple writers? Well, what do you do if I have 5 writers who update our database? Would this be a yes or no then? So of course, it's not the perfect framework. But still, those questions give us an idea of what questions should be asked when deciding whether or not blockchain makes sense for a specific pain point or for a specific use case. And very often you reach or you come to a conclusion that actually you might find other ways or other database structures to use for the specific pain point. Particularly the question of, do you trust a third party? That is quite important. And I think this is one, let's say, fallacy that we have seen quite a lot in blockchain, that thinking about the tech first and saying, look, we can do X, Y, Z without a central authority, without a third party. Well, if you're not solving a problem with this, and if I actually trust my third party, or if I want to have a third party, why should I use blockchain then? So I think that is an important question. And that is also why no one is saying that blockchain, and we said that before, is a silver bullet. And in the same way, often you might just actually want a third party. So blockchain isn't solving any problems, but it just gives the transparency and moves away the responsibility from this one player or this one entity, and gives it to the network. And this in some cases just might not be wanted. If I forget the PIN to my Visa card or to my debit card, I can just ring my local bank, and because they know me, they'll say, yes, okay, we'll send you a new PIN. And that is an example why in some cases you might actually want a third party. In blockchain, if you use your private key, it's gone and you can't recover it. And so all these questions you have to ask yourself, and there's not really the black or white answer. Same goes with, are all writers trusted? And if we need to verify publicly, and so you can come up with other solutions like master-slave databases that could solve the same problem. But this is typically, and that's why I like to show this framework. It is one of those classical frameworks, and I think it highlights quite well the questions that should be asked when considering a blockchain. And in the next one, we see a little bit of an updated version of it, and you see on the left side, you see those use case specific questions that you ask yourself. And they are basically, as you can see, they are very similar to the ones in the framework before. But firstly, they are not as black and white. So you usually have just a range that you can give. And the questions that are asked are a little bit, so I would say less polarizing. So do transactions depend on each other? Would you benefit from not using a third party? Because obviously it's always great to have more responsibility yourself, but actually how much of a benefit does it add, and how much do you gain from it? Same with the trust, and same with the amount of players. But then on the right hand, you see questions, and this framework is by no means exhaustive. We have kind of developed it just to kind of spur some thoughts, and also say that maybe actually there are reasons beyond the perfect text solution why firms might opt for blockchain as the database. And there can be different reasons for it, and we talked about this in an interview that's at the end of this course. There are questions from PR questions to talent and hiring questions that you can ask yourself. And let's say you are an incumbent in the insurance industry, and you know that very likely the insurance industry at some point will be disrupted by blockchain, by which I mean it's not going to take over all other solutions that they are, but blockchain will just be part of all parts of the insurance value chain at some point. Without knowing it, of course, I mean, we also nowadays, we don't say that every app on a phone is really a database app or an internet app. It kind of goes without saying. And in the same way, we will see a couple of implementations, let's say in the insurance industry, throughout the whole industry. And so by knowing this, there could be other reasons why firms might opt to start a blockchain pilot. Such as I want to seed, or I want to start this kind of seed of innovation in my firm. I want to attract talent. I know that I am a player in insurance, and at some point this will be important for me if compliance and regulation changes, and I am forced, or I need to join a blockchain platform. So these are all considerations that you have to ask yourself. And then at some point, it is important, well, actually, if we start small, we are already building talent in blockchain in the firm we're having. And so, of course, I was mentioning also the talent question before. That is kind of the impact I'm mentioning here from internal and external reputation uplift. So if I am, let's say, a German Mittelstand bank, also somewhere in the middle of Germany, it is quite hard for me, and that is one of the key problems that firms have in the digital age, is to attract talent. So how do you really get the best talent to innovate and to from design to actually web and app development somewhere to rural and remote places? And then thinking about, and I think that's a reason why blockchain had actually quite a bad reputation in some cases, because people said, well, this firm is only doing it for PR purposes, or this really actually doesn't really make sense. It can still make sense in the wider picture. So I think these are considerations, and that's why I said these are kind of 1.5 frameworks, because they show this one question, or they're trying to answer the one question: does this technical solution really solve a problem? But then also, does blockchain benefit my firm? So how usually a kind of the blockchain, the value chain looks like is at some point you will, let's say, ideate, and you would come up with blockchain use cases. Usually you would do this in design sprints. We'll talk about this later. So at some point you will have a couple of use cases. And then the question is, how do you prioritize them? And so this is, and again, I mean, this is quite a small and full slide, but this is on purpose, as it shows that deciding what blockchain use case is better or worse than the other is not necessarily just a simple yes or no answer. So we have here divided into the kind of ease and impact of the blockchain use case, and what that means is basically, or basically, this is a cost-benefit analysis. So how easy, or then on the other hand, how costly kind of is it to really implement and do this use case? And there are a lot of questions about the maturity of the tech already, and then how impactful would the use case be? And this is how then you can just cross and somehow distinguish between use cases that you might take forward then. And so in the impact, of course, you have, again, as we said before, this is where the information from our previous framework comes in. That's where you have kind of solution-specific questions to ask yourself. So how big are the pain points currently that we're trying to solve? Is there a potential that we disintermediate? So if in the insurance industry, for example, you actually have a major reason to cut out intermediaries, well, then this might give you a couple of points up. And processing speed and customer service, these are all major considerations that will increase the impact. And then on the other hand, you have the holistic questions, internal and external. We talked about the talent acquisition, but then also kind of internally, if you're kind of then going and seeding and building the seed for internal innovation in your firm, this might have quite the benefits secondary and kind of following from the mere cost savings in between. And then for the ease, you look at different things. How far is the tech, but then also a little bit more holistically, how risky is it to go for the blockchain project? How far are regulators? If I actually don't know if the solution I'm now building will or can be approved in a couple of months, that is a major, of course, a major hurdle or consideration. You can still opt when you say, well, this is one of my riskier sub-projects. You can still risk it, but definitely something to think about. Of course, we have internal and external factors too, and having supported a couple of major digital transformations of large incumbents, I can only say that change management and kind of bringing a team on board is really, really important. We'll look at this later when we talk about the execution and implementation of blockchain projects. But expectation management is key, and also how much ownership does one person or one team really have about the project? What about leadership? If only the C-level says we want to do blockchain and actually no one else is on board, that is already quite the red flag and will make it quite hard to execute it. Good. So I hope in this video I tried to bring you a little bit closer the idea of frameworks, and that there are checklists and some best practices at the strategic planning of a blockchain project. It is not a black box. It is not just a big question mark. Should we do blockchain or not? But if you break things down and if you actually listen to the why and see how the how is made of, you could break down and then easier decide whether or not blockchain makes sense, and then also which blockchain use case and application to prioritize.